All right, the scripture for today is going to be John 21. It's verses 1 through 23. I'll wait for everyone to get there. All right. After this, Jesus revealed himself again to the disciples by the Sea of Tiberias, and he revealed himself in this way. Simon Peter, Thomas called the twin, Nathanael of Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and 2 others of his disciples were together. Simon Peter said to them, "I am going fishing." They said to him, "We will go with you." They went out and got into the boat, but that night they caught nothing. Just as day was breaking, Jesus stood on the shore. Yet the disciples did not know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to them, "Children, do you have any fish?" They answered him, "No." He said to them, "Cast the net on the right side of the boat, and you will find some." So they cast it. And now they were not able to haul it in because of the quantity of fish. That disciple whom Jesus loved therefore said to Peter, "It is the Lord." When Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on his outer garment, for he was stripped for work, and threw himself into the sea. The other disciples came in the boat, dragging the net full of fish, for they were not far from the land, but about 100 yards off. When they got out on land, they saw a charcoal fire in place, with fish laid out on it, and bread. Jesus said to them, "Bring some of the fish that you have just caught." So Simon Peter went aboard and hauled the net ashore, full of large fish, 153 of them. And although there were so many, the net was not torn. Jesus said to them, "Come and have breakfast." Now none of the disciples dared ask him, "Who are you?" They knew it was the Lord. Jesus came and took the bread and gave it to them, and so with the fish. This was now the 3rd time that Jesus was revealed to the disciples after he was raised from the dead. When they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" He said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." He said to him, "Feed my lambs." He said to him a second time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" He said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." He said to him, "Tend my sheep." He said to him the 3rd time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter was grieved because he said to him the 3rd time, "Do you love me?" And he said to him, "Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Feed my sheep. Truly, truly, I say to you, when you were young, you used to dress yourself and walk wherever you wanted. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and another will dress you and carry you where you do not want to go." This he said to show by what kind of death he was to glorify God. And after saying this, he said to him, "Follow me." Peter turned and saw the disciple whom Jesus loved, following them, the one who also had leaned back against him during the supper and had said, "Lord, who is it that is going to betray you?" When Peter saw him, he said to Jesus, "Lord, what about this man?" Jesus said to him, "If it is my will that he remain until I come, what is that to you? You follow me." So the saying spread abroad among the brothers that this disciple was not to die. Yet Jesus did not say to him that he was not to die. But if it is my will that he remain until I come, what is that to you? You may take your seats.
Thank you, Brandon. So Dallas Willard, one of my favorite authors. I know several of you guys like him too. Michael, you get me pulled up here. So Dallas Willard, he was a professor, theological professor at USC, and he had a student come up one time and he said, "Hey Dallas, teacher, you really think that Jesus is alive? You really think he came back from the dead?" And I love this response from Dallas Willard because he told him, he said, "I do believe that he's alive and that he's risen from the dead. I also believe that he can walk up to you and have a conversation." That's so great. So this week we're starting a series that I have been very much excited to teach for 4 weeks. We're going to be covering the encounters of Jesus after the resurrection, before the day of Pentecost. So we're going to be looking at these encounters through the startled eyes of his first disciples. Okay, so the what now? He's risen, but he's told us not to leave. So what do we do now? What now? So that's kind of where we're at. So we'll start. John chapter 20, verse 11. Jesus said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping? Whom are you seeking?" So you guys know this is at the tomb. "Suppose him to be the gardener," she said to him. "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you've laid him, and I'll take him away." Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned and said to him in Hebrew, "Rabboni," which means teacher. Jesus said to her, "Stop clinging to me, for I have not ascended to the Father, but go to my brothers and tell them that I ascend to the Father and your Father and the God and my God." Mary came announcing to the disciples, "I have seen the Lord," and that he had said all of these things. So that's the resurrection. That's the encounter at the resurrection. But now we go to the book of Acts. To these he also presented himself alive after his suffering by many convincing proofs, appearing to them over a period of 40 days, and speaking of the things concerning the kingdom of God. He commanded them not to leave Jerusalem, but to wait for what the Father had promised, which is the Holy Spirit. So between the tomb and before the Spirit, what happened in there, in these encounters? The disciples have seen the risen Christ, but they don't know how to live after the resurrection. So our modern version is, yeah, I know that Jesus is alive, but what does that matter? What's that matter in my shame? What's that matter at work? How does that matter in my life, my everyday? What does that look like now? Now, I want you to note today and for the next 4 weeks, the questions. Okay, questions asked by Jesus. With Mary, "Why are you crying? Who are you looking for?" With the fishermen, "Hey friends, you caught any fish?" With Peter, "Do you love me?" One of my favorites. "What are you talking about as you walk down this road to Emmaus?" Jesus asks over 300 questions. He's only asked around 180, but he only answers directly 3. Now, I can't go on without telling you the 3, so I'm going to tell you this is not the message, but Stan, I know it would keep you up tonight. Well, maybe not. You haven't slept a lot. You're not having trouble sleeping. But you guys might think, man, what were those 3 questions? So the first one, what's the greatest commandment? Who knows that one? What's his response? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, right? And the second one's like it, to love your neighbor as yourself. Next one, how many times should I forgive? Who knows that one? 70 times 7. Does anybody know the third one? Why couldn't we drive out the demon? Because of your little faith. So those are 3. There's a debatable 4th one that some people say he might have directly answered, but those are 3 that are very clear. So he asks 300 questions. He's only asked 180, but he answers directly 3. This is a quote by T.S. Eliot. He's a poet. This is not a spiritual poem, but it is a thought. It says, "O my soul, be prepared for the coming of the stranger. Be prepared for him who knows how to ask questions." So questions are a way of opening hearts. Anybody ever been around somebody who asks really good questions? You know, I know Brandon's a really good conversationalist. He loves to have good conversation. The best conversations start with questions. When somebody asks a really good thought-provoking question, it opens our minds, it opens our hearts. Good questions, okay? So pay attention the next 4 weeks. The questions are so important, so important. So John chapter 1, the risen Jesus doesn't show up with a lecture, so I want you to pay attention with that. He shows up with questions, with a meal, and with some restoring love. It also speaks to people who believe in the resurrection today, but still struggle to live as resurrected people. We have a very hard time not believing in the resurrection and the knowing that Jesus is alive and sits on the throne. But what we struggle with is, how do I live as a resurrected people? How do we live as a resurrected people? So this message has 4 parts: the boat, the question, the meal, and the call. I'm going to read it from here because I cannot read that tiny writing. Starting in verse 1, later Jesus appeared again to his disciples beside the Sea of Galilee. This is how it happened. Several of the disciples were there. Simon Peter, Thomas, nicknamed the twin, which your Bible may say Didymus. Who has a nickname Didymus? I'm glad we have Tom, maybe Tom. I don't know. No, anyway. Nathanael from Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and 2 other disciples. Simon Peter said, "I'm going fishing." "We'll come too," he said. And so they went out in the boat, but they caught nothing all night. At dawn, Jesus was standing on the beach, but the disciples couldn't see who he was. He called out, "Fellows, have you caught any fish?" So I'm going fishing. I remember when I was in college, he wasn't a roommate. He was one of those guys that just showed up and stayed with you, never paid rent, never bought any groceries, but he was always there. So it was the end of the semester. We were all getting our grades, and we were coming back. Anyway, he had completely failed the semester. I don't think he passed a single class. He had wasted all of his parents' money, all of his time. He had done all this. And anyway, we were sitting around. We were talking about our grades and next semester and what are you going to take? And he said, "I don't really know what I'm going to do. How am I going to tell my parents? I just failed out of college." So I said, "Well, man, what are you going to do?" And his response stuck, and it immediately popped in my mind. He said, "I'm going fishing." That's okay. I didn't go fishing with him, but yeah. So I'm going fishing. So this is what Peter says. I'm going fishing. Mind you, they've seen the empty tomb. They've seen the risen Jesus. And they've watched Thomas place his hand on the wounds. That's where we are. This is the 3rd time they've seen him. And they have seen all of these things. Yet they return to what they know. Now, 2 likely reasons. One is the easy answer is money. This was livelihood. This is how they raised money. I can imagine after following Jesus for so long that they needed a little money, right? They needed some income. Or he was doing what a lot of us do, hiding your shame under the guise of productivity. If I'm too ashamed to deal with this, if I'm too upset to deal with this, if I don't have it in here or in here to go to that place, I'm just going to go fishing. I'm just going to go to work. James, if I'm having a really bad day, I'm just going to go to work. Anybody know anybody that does that? Nobody? Okay. I think it's the shame. I think Peter is running, and I think he's running from his shame, and I think he's running from his denial, and he's been forgiven, and he knows that. Mind you, he's seen Jesus twice, but he hasn't yet been restored. He's still full of shame. Shame will drive us back to our default, the things that make us comfortable, the places that make us feel comfortable, the places that don't make us feel that tension and that guilt. We will run away from that and we will go to whatever it is that's comfortable every single time. We drift back to familiar patterns when things are confusing or frustrating or disappointing. We want to be in control. As dawn breaks, Jesus is standing on the shore, but they don't recognize him. Now, here in a minute, you'll see it's 100 yards, and I have pretty good eyes, but I can't see who's sitting at the sound booth back there. So 100 yards away, they can't really tell who's out there, right? So dawn breaks, he's standing on the shore, but they don't see him. The part of that hits me is, how often is the Father so close to us? He's right here. But we are too distracted. We're too busy running. We're too busy not being present to see him right there. To have Jesus 100 yards away, we see what happens here in a minute when they finally realize it, but Think about it. He's always there. He's right there. Why don't we see him? It's because we're busy. So he called, "Fellows, have you caught any fish?" "No," they replied. Then he said, "Throw out your net on the right side, and you'll get some." So they did, and they couldn't haul it in the net because there were so many fish in it. Then the disciple who Jesus loved said to Peter, "It's the Lord." When Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on his tunic, for he had stopped for work. He jumped in the water, and he headed to shore. Peter throws himself into the water, eager to get to Jesus. Think about what I just said, though, about Mary at the tomb. What did she do when she realized that it was Jesus, not the gardener? He says, "Stop clinging to me, woman. I have not yet ascended to the Father." She says, "Teacher," and the next word is, "Stop clinging to me." She grabs him as fast as she can. Peter does the same thing here. Now, the question from the shore, "Friends, have you any fish?" This is funny. I told you that Jesus asked playful questions. He asked funny questions. So it is an unwritten man code that if you see a man holding a fishing pole at the lake, you have to ask him, "Have you caught anything?" Did you catch anything? Don, it doesn't matter if I'm at the beach, if I'm at the lake, if I'm at the river, or if I'm at the pond next door. If I see a man with a fishing pole, I have to ask him. I have to. Did you catch anything? So this is what he's doing here. Did you catch anything? And when they said no, he said, "Well, throw your net on the right side and you'll catch some." I don't know about y'all, but I don't really like unsolicited advice. When I'm obviously struggling with something and somebody says, "Hey, have you ever thought of that?" I can just imagine one of them. I'll say Thomas Didymus. I'll say, "I'll show you where I'll throw that net, buddy. Don't tell me where to throw my net. I know what I'm doing here." Yeah, so the unsolicited advice. But what turns out is they follow the instruction, and it's this massive, massive catch of fish. So this isn't to be confused with the fishing miracle in Mark chapter 5. This is a separate incident. There's so many things that are different here. So this is not the same thing. So don't think this miraculous catch is the same miraculous catch that he performed when they first met and he first called them. It's very different. Very similar, but very different. When John says it's the Lord, Peter throws himself into the water, eager to get to Jesus. Just like Mary. So imagine this. Peter, knowing he still feels that shame, plunges into the water. 100 yards. Guys, Andy puts his shirt on. I know if I'm going to swim 100 yards, I'm going to take my shirt, my shoes, everything off. Right? That's 100 yards of swimming, but he can't get there fast enough. If you'll look back at Mark chapter 5, in that miracle, does anybody remember Peter's response? When he falls to his knees and he says, "Depart from me, for I am a sinful man." How does that look now? The first time he's asking Jesus to get away, and the second time he can't get to him fast enough because he's been walking with him and he knows him. He knows what Jesus' response is going to be. So what's it look like for you to fish all night with no luck? To regress back into something familiar that's unfruitful. I can almost think, communion, I was leading that just a minute ago, and I asked Brian just yesterday if I could change because I've had that in my heart. I had this feeling of, if you're sitting on a bar stool and you've had one too many, and you're in a place of shame and hurt, I asked you to imagine Jesus saying, "Take and eat, and let's go." because I'm wiping all of this away. Follow me. But also, I can see sitting there and Jesus looking over saying, you happy yet? I can see you making a lot of money being no issue, and then you being deeply, deeply saddened and can't find happiness. And the Father saying, you fulfilled yet? You had enough? Chasing and running after the things that don't matter. Had enough yet? It's not always more stuff, it's more of Him. It's the provision, the peace, and the purpose that comes from encounters with Jesus. So faith doesn't mean the absence of failure. It just means that when we fail, we ask for forgiveness, we look to Jesus, and we move forward as fast as we can, just like Mary. And when you realize who Jesus is, what He's done for you, and where He'll lead you, you can't get there fast enough. Jake, you can't move slow in that direction. It's not possible. Picking up in verse 9. When they got there, they found breakfast waiting for them, fish cooking over a charcoal fire and some bread. Bring some of the fish you've caught, Jesus said. So Simon Peter went aboard and dragged the net to the shore. There were 153 large fish, yet the net hadn't torn. Now come and have breakfast, Jesus said. None of the disciples dared to ask Him, who are you? They knew it was the Lord. Then Jesus served them the bread and the fish. This was the third time Jesus had appeared to His disciples since He had been raised from the dead. So what's interesting here is He knows where they're at. I thought that was neat. He knows right where they are. He knows right where you go when you're too ashamed to find Him. Think about the garden. Why are you ashamed? Well, we heard you coming. Why are you hiding? He knew where you are. He knew where Adam and Eve were. He knew where Peter was, and He knows where you go. It reminds me of the psalm, where can I go from your presence? Where can I hide from your love? If I make my bed in the grave, you're there. If I go up to the heavens, you're there. You can't outrun your shame. There's no place you can go to and get away from it. You're better off just taking it head on. Now he knows where Peter will be, but he first has to deal with his wounds. He has to go to that place. And a moment ago in communion, that's what I was asking. You go to that place. Don't be afraid of it. You go there. Don't go alone, though. Now, my favorite part is the charcoal. And if you prayed with us before service, you got a little bit of a spoiler for this part. Now the disciples arrive and they see a charcoal fire. The Greek word, I'll put this up here, is anthrikeia. It appears 2 times in the New Testament. Right here in John chapter 21. But the first time, it's in John chapter 18. The woman asked Peter, "You're not one of the man's disciples, are you?" "No," he said, "I'm not." Because it was cold, the household servants and the guards had made a charcoal fire. They stood around it warming themselves, and Peter stood with them warming his hands. The other time, right here, when they got there, they found breakfast waiting for them, fish cooking over a charcoal fire. So, I'll point out that John is an incredibly detailed writer. For those of you that have studied John's writings, it's all about the details. 153 fish. Does anybody want to know why there was 153 fish? Because he counted them. There's 153 fish. Is that relevant? Probably. Do I know why? Nope. Everybody has an opinion. There's 153 fish. The detail of John's writings is impeccable. The little things in John's writings almost unlock another door of some beautiful passage of Scripture. And this is the same way. The very first time Peter's around a charcoal fire, he denied Jesus for the first time to a little girl. The second time, Jesus is warming breakfast on a charcoal fire. Same type of fire, same smell, same sensory memory. Now my kids are going to laugh at me. Bo's not here. Bo really made fun of me. So I went kind of science-y on them about this. So smell is especially strong at evoking episodic memories or vivid recollections, okay? And the reason is that the olfactory bulbs that smell are directly connected to the part of your brain that are critical for emotion and memory. There's not a bypass. It doesn't have to go through a bunch of different routes. It's a direct line from your nose to your brain so you can recollect vivid memories instantly. So think about some scents. I think about, leather, a sweaty ball cap, dust, and sunflower seeds. And I'm a little boy playing baseball or coaching a little boy's baseball team now, right? That gets me. Allie's worn the same perfume since I met her. I think of my wife when I smell that, which is weird when you're walking through Walmart and you by yourself. But smells, right? Smells. I was telling Allie, I have after my grandpa passed away, I found a gun cleaning kit. And I took it home and I opened it, but the smell of that, he was a mechanic. Brandon, he was in the Air Force and he worked on airplanes, and he always smelled of grease and degreaser and all of these things. And when I opened it, I smelled him. And he'd been gone for many months, but I smelled him. So I closed it and I put it in my gun safe. I didn't open it again. I don't get into it. Once or twice a year, when I'm getting the gun out, whatever, I'll see it and I'll open it and I'll smell it, and it takes me right back. Anybody else have memories like that? Smells get you. So imagine that. They're sitting on the beach. There's this fire and the smells, the lapping of the waves against the boat, the smell of the fish, the sounds of his friends, all of these familiar things. And Jesus is putting all of it together like a beautiful puzzle for this big moment for Peter where he has to deal with it. Sitting by the water, the sights and the sounds of his past, so what he used to do. Jesus told him you weren't going to fish for fish anymore. But here he is, fishing for fish. Jesus intentionally recreates the scene, but this time with grace and a welcome. He's already got fish on the fire. Yet he invites them to bring some of their catch. And I think this part of the story is very important, because he is inviting Peter to set the table. Noni. He's inviting us to commune with him, to dine with him, to share a meal. And we're active participants in that. Come and have breakfast. That's an invitation to table fellowship. I truly believe that life happens best around a table. That's why life groups are so important here. Life's better in circles and not in rows. Amen. If you don't know that. Community around a table. So Jesus meets Peter, and he meets us, not with a lecture, but with a meal, with an invitation. He addresses our physical and our spiritual hunger. He says, come and eat, before he says, feed my sheep. At the first charcoal fire, Peter experiences the weight of his denial, but at the second one, he experiences the welcome of no condemnation. If you hear nothing else this morning, hear this, that Jesus will turn the place of your deepest shame into the place of your deepest restoration. He will take that place that you hate to go, that you're afraid to go to. He'll take that place that is so incredibly hurtful, and he'll turn it around and make it the biggest restoration story of your life. Amen. Amen. Now the question. Picking up in verse 15. After breakfast, Jesus asked Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" "Yes, Lord," Peter replied. "You know I love you. Then feed my lambs." Jesus repeated the question, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" "Yes, Lord, you know I love you. Then take care of my sheep." Jesus said a third time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter was hurt that Jesus asked the question a third time. He said, "Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you." Jesus said, "Then feed my sheep." So here's one peculiar detail of the story. He invites them to breakfast, and then it says after breakfast. I can't help but wonder, what do they talk about? The detail is in the writing of John. He takes so much care to note the 153 fish and who this was and what this was and why this was this way and a charcoal fire. Why in the world does he not talk about what they talked about at breakfast? It drives me crazy, and I have no answers for that. But wouldn't it be interesting to know what they talked about at breakfast? Now, 3 questions, 3 denials. There is definitely a strong connection. He denied him 3 times. He asked him 3 times. But notice, he didn't come up and tell Peter. He said, "Hey, Peter, I know what you did. You want me to tell you how that made me feel?" "Peter, why'd you do that?" "I told you were going to, but why'd you do it anyway?" "Hey, Peter, what can we do now to make sure that doesn't happen again?" That's not what he says. He asked him 3 times, "Do you love me?" It's not cruelty. It's very careful. It's a gentle revisiting of that wound so healing can happen. Jesus knew that he loved him. Just like Peter said, "You know this." He needed Peter to say it. Jesus doesn't ignore or minimize Peter's failure. He invites Peter to name his love where he once denied. I can imagine Peter, probably after, if he's anything like me, probably after the second or third time, realizing what Jesus is doing here. And after that second one, yeah. And then after the third one, it says he got upset, but I think maybe he might have gotten upset because he's going there. He's going to that place. This is the moment where it turns. Each of those is answered with a commission. He doesn't say, "Do you love me?" Yes. He doesn't say, "Good." He gives him a job to do. He doesn't ask him a second time and say, "Are you sure you love me?" "Yes, Father, you know." He doesn't say, "Good. Glad we're squared." No, he gives him a job. So Jesus forgives Peter, and then he entrusts him with some responsibility. I think that's very important. That's a very important part of the story. Picking up in verse 18. "I tell you the truth, when you were young, you were able to do as you liked. You dressed yourself and went wherever you wanted to go. But when you're old, you will stretch out your hands, and others will dress you and take you where you do not want to go." Jesus said this to let him know what kind of death he would glorify God. Then Jesus told him, "Follow me." Peter turned around and saw behind them the disciple Jesus loved, the one who had leaned over to Jesus during the supper and asked, "Lord, who will betray you?" Peter asked Jesus, "What about that guy? What about him?" Jesus replied, "If I want him to remain alive until I return, what is that to you? As for you, you follow me." So, how dumb can Peter be right here? He's just been restored. And he's like, what about that guy? Not too bright, is he, Don? So there's I just mentioned my grandpa a minute ago. Let me go back. So failure, I got a little ahead of myself. Jesus ends again by saying, follow me. It's the same call as Mark chapter 5. It's the same thing, follow me. Yet he's having to tell him again later. Any of you guys had to be told by anybody more than once to do anything? Me. So failure, he did not do what he was supposed to do. Hence the second time, right, Tim? He's having to tell him twice because he didn't do it the first time. And having young kids, I know how that feels. Talking about your brother. I'm kidding. But this part of the story, and why I had to go back to it, because I didn't want to miss this. We fail all the time. Every one of us fail. Not at just following Jesus. We fail at work. We'll fail as a father. I fail as a coach. I fail as a husband. I fail nearly at everything that I do pretty regularly, really. It's a constant going back, asking for forgiveness, get it right, and move forward. But here's the part I don't want you to miss. Failures are events, not people. I'll say it again. Failures are events. They are not people. A failure is something that happens. A failure is not a person. And I think Peter's probably realizing this right here. Now Peter turns and he's really quick to start comparing. What about him? Immediately after being restored, Peter looks at John and he says, hey, Lord, what about this guy? Isn't that our tendency as broken people, is to compare our calling, our story, our path to somebody else's? Jesus' response was, if I want him to remain until I return, what's that to you? What's that matter to you? Stan, I'm glad you're here this morning. Horse races. Horses wear blinders. Why is that? Stay in their lane. Don't be worried about this over here. What happens if you take those off of a racehorse right before a race? Dead last. I hope your money's on that horse finishing last, because it's not going to do very well if you pull the blinders. They run their race by focusing forward. Sometimes we need spiritual blinders.
Amen.
We put them on, and we go where he says to follow. And we don't look left, we don't look right, and we go. And just like Peter and Mary, we go fast. Comparison is toxic. Toxic. We'll slow down right here, because some of you are comparing people. You're thinking about you and where you're at in your career, and this other person doesn't deserve to be where they are. Gary, I've been going to the gym for 3 years. Why don't I look like you? Does that make sense? That ain't going to happen. You're right. You are right, Sue. That's not going to happen. Hey, you're better betting on that horse without blinders than me looking like Gary. I promise. I promise. Comparison is toxic and has no place in the kingdom. When you compare yourself or your situation or your path or your calling or anything else to somebody else, it's going to do one of two things. It's going to give you a sense of superiority, which makes you feel like you're better than somebody else. Or it's going to give you a sense of inferiority. It's going to make you feel like somebody else is better than you. neither are glorifying to God, and I'll say it again, have any place in the kingdom. We all have unique gifts, talents, abilities. So a few things that you can do to make sure that you're free from these. And I will say this, teachers, we should probably do a big series on comparisons. I think this would preach all day. Follow Christ within the limits of your life. If you follow Jesus within the limits of your life. You use the gifts that you've been given. You don't use gifts that somebody else has that you have no ability in. You be faithful in the time and the season you have. I love coaching Little League Baseball. I really don't have time for it. Why do I do it? Because I love it. It's a ministry. Because I've got a group of young men that are growing up, and I've had them for years, and it is something that I am very passionate about. Be faithful in the time and the season you have. My kids are going to be gone soon. 6 years. Hazel, how old are you? I'm kidding. You're 12. You got 6 years, 7, 8. They just got me. They just got me. Sorry, guys. Okay. That's a little trap from Hazel. Okay, so sorry. You only have so much time in the seasons that you have. I know I'm only a dad with little kids at my house one time. I'm leaning in. Some of you only have limited time to pour into the next generation. And for those of you that were here a few weeks ago and heard me get pretty passionate about our children, now's the time. And the last one is, hear Jesus say to you, what is it to you? You follow me. It happens at our house sometime, and I know I'm picking on my kids a lot today, but I'll ask Hazel to do something, or I'll ask Bo to do something. One of my kids, I'll ask Bo, I'll say, hey, would you take out the trash? Well, what about her? You go mow the yard then. No, not really. But that's how I feel as a father, and I think that's probably how our Father feels about us. Whenever we are called to do something and yeah, but what about them? Jake, you're way better teachers than I am. What about Jake? Why don't he do that? That's the worship team to come up. So the boat, we drift back to what's familiar. So think about where in your life I'm going fishing. When you have a bad day, do you tackle it? Do you ask Jesus to help you in that moment? Or do you go to the golf course? Or do you go fishing? Or like Peter, you just go to work. I want to deal with it. I'm just going to go to work. The breakfast. Welcome to By Grace. Jesus doesn't use you. He welcomes you. He says, come and have breakfast before he gives you an assignment. So maybe this morning you need to think about dining with the Maker and just being and not worrying. Don't be worried about doing in the tasks. Just be there. Or the charcoal fire, the restoration. The symbol of Peter's worst moment becomes the setting of his restoration. And for those of you that know, he was the speaker at Pentecost. When the Spirit came, he was the man. And this is work that Jesus was doing right here to set the stage for the explosion and the expansion of the gospel. Started at the fire. Invite him into a specific place in your life that you don't like to go. And you'll be amazed at how comfortable you get. And the call, Jesus' call, is personal, specific, and full of grace. As each of us follows in our lane, the whole church is strengthened. The whole body is strengthened. So if you've gone back to the boat, go back to Jesus. If you've got a charcoal fire moment, if you have things that just keep coming to your mind that remind you of a very hurtful place, a place that takes you to deep shame, take it head on. Invite Jesus to join you right there. And just like we talked in communion, take and eat. Allow him to do that with you this morning. Maybe he's asking, do you love me? Answer honestly in prayer. Or maybe you're like Peter, and you would rather look at somebody else and pick on somebody else than look at yourself. If he's saying, you stay in your own lane, you follow me, I suggest that you pray this morning and respond to that. So we're going to sing. We're going to respond here this morning. We're going to stand. Let's worship. Guys, I'm up front. If anybody needs prayer, I know we'll have a couple other folks around the room. If you guys want prayer, need prayer, I'm going to say one more thing specific to our body this morning. I know that we have one person in the hospital this morning. I know that we have another awaiting surgery. I know of at least one marriage that's struggling, and I know of a few kids that are really having a hard time. Guys, as Christians and as followers of Jesus, we are called to not only pray for ourselves, but we are all called to intercede in prayer for people. All of us. And if all you do is pray for yourself and things that benefit you, I hate to say it, but you're being a little bit selfish. I'm going to challenge you this morning. If you guys know of those people that I'm talking about, the ones that are in the hospital, that are having surgery, whose marriages are struggling, whose kids are struggling, if you guys know of any of that, I'm not just asking you to respond to my message this morning, but what I want you to do is stand up and stand in the gap. It's open. We're here to pray. We've got prayer in the back. Just respond. Done. All right, let's stand. Father God, we love you and we thank you so much for this morning. We thank you for the opportunity and the privilege to come together and to worship. We thank you for the commission that you've given us all, and that is to follow you. I pray that you would encourage us and build us up so we can live a life of boldness and a life of faith. As we step out, as we leave here, may we spread the kingdom everywhere we go. We love you and we thank you.